The notion that a radical is one who hates his country is naive and usually idiotic. He is, more likely, one who loves his country more than the rest of us, and is thus more disturbed than the rest of us when he sees it debauched. He's not a bad citizen turning to crime. He's a good citizen driven to despair. And that was said by Henry Louis Mencken. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. Well, folks, what a world we live in. And I say that because things are certainly escalating around the place. It's interesting here in Byron Bay, where I live. For the last week, it would seem as if we have been invaded by the police. I think it was last weekend there was 70 police out in town last Friday night. And I live in a very small town, folks, and so to see 70 police walking around town when there's usually something like 3 or possibly 4 was quite a spectacle. We had a black 4-wheel drive with public order and riot squad emblazoned on the side, parked in the middle of the road, so everybody had to drive around it, up near the beach. We had a huge bus parked up near the beach with police command centre on it. And we had breathalyzer units set up just on the outskirts of town. We had groups of police simply wandering around in packs of 8, many of them wearing body armour and all brandishing a variety of deadly weapons, including guns, tasers and batons, handcuffs, pepper spray, all the usual great party stuff that they like to use. We had sniffer dogs wandering around town, accosting people in nightclubs and hotels, and we even had the mounted police doing laps up and down the main street. It was a real spectacle, folks, and I was actually out at a hotel talking to a friend, and I had a police dog come up and accost me. I asked the police officer to please control their animal, and she just kind of looked at me. And I said to the police officer, "This is a little bit of overkill, don't you think?" And they said, "Oh, well, we're doing it for your public safety because it's schoolies week." And so that was the reason there were all of these 70 police in the town here, folks, because some 17-year-old school kids had finished school for the year. And there was probably an extra maybe 30 or 40 kids wandering around that night. And I don't know how much the council would have spent on the exercise, but it seems that they considered these children to be such a threat to social order that they decided it would be good to demonstrate a massive police presence in this quiet little town of Byron Bay. Quite remarkable to see the mentality of the local council to put on something like this to begin with. I mean, it really does boggle the mind. All of the locals were walking around town saying, well, this is just downright embarrassing. Because it really was, folks. It was embarrassing to see this many armed thugs walking around town. And what was also incredibly embarrassing was the mentality that they were displaying. I mean, you've got huge men walking around in body armour to protect themselves against these frail school kids that had just left school in the quiet seaside town of Byron Bay. But then I suppose it is a nice place to come for a holiday, even for a police officer, because that's pretty well what they did. And what we really saw on the weekend was a massive show of force just because they can do so. They just want people to get used to having this amount of police around. I mean, all these kids are just leaving school, and they want these kids to have it indelibly imprinted into their brain that this is what the real world is like. And don't you dare ever even think of stepping outside of the lines, because we've got all of these big guys with deadly weapons who are just waiting to put you in your place. I mean, I've seen this type of police presence in places before, folks, but to do it here in Byron Bay, which is just a seaside town, I mean, it's not a very big place, just goes to show how far they are willing to push things. And pushing things is what they're certainly doing, folks. There's some disturbing news coming out of New Zealand as well, because it appears that the government is attempting to pass a food bill. Apparently it's already seen its first viewing, and it's up for another one next year, and if the second viewing passes, then the bill will basically turn what is a human right to grow food and to share it into a government-authorised privilege that can be summarily revoked. The food bill will make it illegal to distribute food without authorisation, and it defines food in such a way that it includes nutrients, seeds, natural medicines, essential minerals, and drinks including water. So this is basically saying you can't give anything that you grow to anybody. You can't even give your neighbours water. If you do so, you may be subject to prosecution. And by controlling seeds, the bill also takes the power to grow food away from the public and puts it in the hands of seed companies such as Monsanto. And even if you're going to have like a local market stall or, what they call cottage industries, you will need authorization to sell food at any of these sorts of places. You can't just go to a market and sell your food anymore. And this is all, of course, coming back to Codex Alimentarius, folks. Now, this bill isn't in yet, but this is what they are doing in New Zealand. And, folks, New Zealand is a place that basically told America it couldn't bring its nuclear warships there. So in the eyes of activists and in the eyes of most people, New Zealand presents itself as a country that values human rights and values the environment and wants to stand up for the rights of the people. But what we've seen in New Zealand is the introduction of carbon tax along with Australia, and now we are seeing a very, very determined effort to ban the growing of food, to ban the distribution of food, to ban the distribution of seeds, to undermine any efforts the people may be taking to become self-sufficient within their local communities. Homegrown food and some or all seed cannot be even bartered amongst people or given away. And folks, look, just step back and think about this for a minute. This bill has the potential to make it illegal for you to hand your neighbour a tomato or a head of lettuce over the fence. It makes it illegal for you to say, gee, these watermelons that I grew this year are spectacular. Take some of the seeds so you can grow yourself some spectacular watermelons next year. They're making it a crime to do this, folks. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. They would even consider writing legislation like this, let alone enacting it. I mean, in all honesty, you hear things like this and you think, this is just not possible. There's no way that the people are going to allow the government, who are simply our employees, to create legislation that makes it illegal to be self-sufficient and makes it illegal for you to feed your neighbours. And it just boggles the mind, and yet there it is. It's right there. You can go to a website called nzfoodsecurity.org and you can check out what they're saying about this bill. And as I said, folks, it's not in yet, but this is what they are attempting to bring in. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if they pull it off in New Zealand, then the methodology they used will be copied and the plan will be extrapolated out around the world. Because they do this with everything. Doesn't matter what country they try it in. Gun control, this control, that control. They'll try it somewhere until they get it right, and then they just copy the model. And you find that everybody around the planet starts doing this at the same time. And it isn't a coincidence, folks. It isn't a coincidence you get certain food bills and certain regulations brought in all countries across the board. I mean, we've even caught the Australian Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister making the same speech. And I guarantee it was probably made by the British Prime Minister as well. Or something similar would have been. And then you'll probably hear it in America as well. I mean, it all happens roughly along the same time scale in all countries, folks, across Europe, across Australia and Canada and America and England. They all bring these laws in at roughly the same time. And this doesn't happen by coincidence. All the world is indeed a stage, my friends, and if you can keep that in mind when you're looking at the international news or even the workings within your own country, you can most definitely begin to see patterns. And look, the only way we're going to fix any of this, folks, is through a united action of the people. The only way you're going to be able to stand up against things such as this ridiculous food bill they're attempting to bring in New Zealand is to have a united community. I mean, if this bill is passed, I would suggest that the first thing everybody in New Zealand should do is start growing as much food as they can and giving away as much as they can. I think it deserves a strong communal effort to display an action of non-compliance and solidarity in the face of this, because no government has the right to take away someone's right to grow food or to share food, because this bill basically has the potential to make it illegal to show empathy to another. I don't know who writes this stuff, folks. I can't imagine the mentality of the mind behind such legislation, but here it is for all to see. Oh, and something that I forgot to mention then is that safety officers can raid your house to enforce this act. They can use whatever they need to do so, which includes deadly weapons, and they don't need a warrant to do so, and new legislation has also been passed which makes such workers immune from criminal or civil prosecution. So there should be no question as to how corrupt this new law is, and you can see what they're going to do, folks. They're going to employ safety officers who will be carrying out these raids from a pure state of ego, because, as I've often said, folks, when you take all the power away from someone and then give them power over somebody else, they tend to allow their egos to take over and are quite willing to inflict themselves upon anybody that they can. I spoke about a similar occurrence recently in the United States where we saw a lady raid a organic food party and force them to throw out all their food simply because she believed she had the power to do so. And so an effort has to be made by the people to stand up against all of this sort of stuff. I mean, that's the only way we're going to do it. There is no remedy at law. There is no legal remedy. There is no political remedy. There is no remedy in revolution. What is needed is a united act of non-compliance. We need things like the Occupy movement, only with a direction, and we need people to basically occupy themselves. And by that I mean we need people to stand in who and what they are, and to love their neighbours as they love themselves, and to work and support their neighbours, and to stand up as a community, because we have to do this, folks. We absolutely have to do it. We can't allow our public servants to continue with these ridiculous pieces of legislation. And we can't allow the continuance of practices such as coal seam gas mining. As I've often said on other shows, each generation that exists on this planet are the custodians of the planet. We are the custodians of freedom and the custodians of life for future generations. And we cannot allow our public servants to destroy our water table. And make no mistake, folks, this is the fight of our lives. I've said before that if we do not stop coal seam gas mining and stop fracking right now, all the time we will have left on this planet is around 3 to 5 generations. And I'm viewing a generation as around about 20 to 25 years. Because I would say that at the present rate of destruction and the present rate of inaction by the people, if we do not rise to the occasion and change the direction in which the ship of state is currently sailing, then I estimate that we have around about 100 years of life left on this planet. And we've got about 12 months to turn this around, so it's important that people get active. Now, as I've said so very often, folks, everything is energy. And understanding energy and understanding how it works and understanding how reality works is key to removing the fear within yourself that keeps you divided from the people around you. And the reason I've kept coming back to this is because it's important for people to put away the stuff they have with their neighbours and the stuff they have with other people. Because it doesn't matter who it is or how they've wronged you. We have to get rid of this stuff and stand up for the common good, stand up for a common cause, realise that we are all in this together, and change the direction in which we're going.